Good evening. Today is Monday, April 17, 2023, and this is the 146th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. Before we get on our podcast today, a quick word from our sponsor, Epoch Times.
We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. The Epoch Times is independent. We're not controlled by any special interest, and we never will be. This is a battle between truth and deceit, a battle between forces that would ensnare this country in ignorance, and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. Subscribe today to our digital edition at theepochtimes.com and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. Read the difference on all your devices. We'd love to have you on board.
My returning guest tonight is James Roguski, a researcher and an author, a natural health proponent who does believe that truly the old systems are rightfully crumbling. So we have to get together and build their replacements as quickly as possible. In March of 2022, James was able to uncover documents that were regarding the proposed amendments to the International Health Regulation, IHRs, and was instrumental in raising the awareness about them, which resulted in the amendments being rejected. James is now doing his best, everything possible, in order to expose the World Health Organization's, WHO's, hidden agenda, as he says, behind the proposed pandemic treaty, as well as the WHO's ongoing attempts around the international health regulations. James' vision for the future can be summarized by one phrase: out of the WHO and in with the new. James is here today to discuss the discussions, the debates that took place in the United Kingdom's parliamentary talks and regarding the pandemic treaty, and also to update us on the international health regulation amendment changes that are still being pushed by the WHO and its funders. James, it's good to have you here. Much appreciated coming back on a short notice again.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Today was kind of a yin and yang sort of day. The debate in the UK Parliament was definitely a positive development, because the opposite end of that is at the very same time in Geneva, the working group for the international health regulations pretty much is meeting in secret. And in addition to that, earlier in the week, I reported on the fact that the European Union submitted over again about as much text as is currently in the pandemic treaty, new information. So there's many aspects to talk about. We're going to start off talking about the parliamentary debate, which was about 2 hours and 15 minutes this morning for me here in California, 4:30 p.m. In the UK. And all in all, I thought it was a positive experience, because we're not even supposed to be talking about this. If the powers that be had their way, they would just be quietly having their discussions in Geneva. But the simple fact that the people of the UK a year ago, 11 months ago, got well over 100,000 signatures requiring a discussion in Parliament. And then much thanks to Member of Parliament Andrew Bridgen, who on February 23rd stood up in Parliament and requested a discussion. That discussion was held today. Now, we haven't discussed this, but this is a personal thing for me when I talk to people about reaching out to others. I tell them on an ongoing basis, if you get 1 out of 200 people that you communicate with to respond, to what your request is, you're actually doing really good. And we did twice as good this time. A full 1% of the entire Parliament of the UK showed up and had something intelligent and positive to say showing very clearly that they had done their homework. They had read the treaty and the amendments, and they knew what they were talking about. And I'm just going to name some names, okay? Obviously, Andrew Bridgen spoke out at great length. I think you're maybe going to have some videos about him. Sir Christopher Chope, Danny Kruger, Esther McVeigh, John Redwood, and very neutral, I would say, but also positive, Sally Ann Hart. 6 members of Parliament showed up at the debate and spoke intelligently on behalf of their constituents. Okay, there are well over 600 other members of Parliament who dropped the ball. Some of them showed up and made political statements, made propaganda statements. I encourage people to actually watch the debate. I actually thought it was kind of entertaining.
No, I thought it was a wonderful debate, to be honest. I mean, if we had debates like that took place in the U.S. Congress, I'd be much more happy about the direction of the country. But I got to tell you, you're right. They did their homework. It was very entertaining to listen, and you like listening to it when you know that they've done their due diligence as far as reading through the text, because everything they were laying out was basically, this is what the text says, this is what we've seen, here's how it's going to affect us in the long run. But I do want to start with the first video, kind of a reset for our audiences out there as to the WHO, and we'll go ahead and key out that first video and then continue our discussion.
Talking about the WHO itself, as my honourable friend for Don Valley pointed out, it was founded in 1948, a specialised agency of the United Nations responsible for international public health. It consists of 192 member states, basically the whole of the UN membership, excluding Liechtenstein and the Holy See. And it was based originally on a WH constitution, which is still today, but this constitution will be fundamentally changed by the 2 instruments that are in the pipeline following the COVID-19 pandemic. The WHO is domiciled in Geneva, and so it has special status. Its employees are exempt from tax, and they and their families all have diplomatic immunity. It is indeed a supranational body, unelected and unaccountable. I think my constituents would fear that.
As he said, unelected and unaccountable, and we should fear that. We shouldn't allow individuals who we did not elect to office to be able to have a say as to how our lives should be managed. And I think it's fair point to make. I know that WHO lead will come back and say, well, no, it's still in the hands of the various different parliaments of the world. But when you're talking about that, pretty much every nation in the UN, as it was laid out, is tied to the WHO. It does give it its credibility. And by that said, it gives it its authority, and it makes it very difficult for people to counter it. But your perspective?
Well, one of the things that he said in that brief little clip was that there are 2 things being considered. Right now, the petition that was accepted by Parliament and was being discussed was the people that signed the petition said that they did not want the Parliament or the United Kingdom's government to adopt any treaty unless it was put forth to a referendum for the public. Now, he also mentioned that there are a second path, the international health regulations, which were discussed a little bit. And it was good that it was raised in the debate, even though the debate wasn't specifically about them, because they do go hand in hand. The third aspect of it, though, one of the things that I think we talked a little bit about last time was I don't believe I have to go through the whole transcript and I have to watch it all over again, but I think they completely failed to address the reality that last May, changes were made to the international health regulations, which for the most part, nobody seems to want to talk about. There is another petition gaining signatures. They've already got 10,000 signatures, and 100,000 will get a debate, but we're expecting a response from the UK government. The issue at hand is people get these 2 things completely confused, and the confusion continues because with a treaty, there is, a pathway by which a prime minister or a president would sign it, or Parliament or Congress or the Senate would weigh in on it. But the amendments to the international health regulations go through a different pathway. And this is the part that people have a great difficulty comprehending. As he mentioned, the unelected, unaccountable, in many ways unknown delegates to the WHO, if they get together and meet and decide to change the international health amendments, they will thusly be changed. And there is no signature needed. It's all part of the agreement that we're already a party to. And so there were many different attempts to smear the people who were supporting the debate and the discussion. They raised the specter of conspiracy theory. They used the phrase anti-vaxxers. But the question here really is one of sovereignty and who would be in control of how the response to a future pandemic or other problem would be raised. And interestingly enough, the people who were, I would say, in opposition to having this discussion clearly did not read the documents. They did not once raise any issue that is currently on the table in the treaty itself. And one of the newest things that I certainly didn't expect them to talk about it, but the European Union, very quietly, it's still actually somewhat of a secret, the European Union submitted a couple of dozen pages of text in addition to the existing 32-page document that is the pandemic treaty. And, really none of the details of the treaty were discussed in the debate. They did a lot of ad hominem attacks on people and, calling them conspiracy theorists or anti-vaxxers. But when you actually really get into what it's all about, it's really about giving control over to the Director General of the World Health Organization to then control the means of production in the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex. And so I'm very pleased that the discussion happened. I'm very pleased that there were at least 1% of the members of parliament who showed up and had done their homework and were clearly aware of what the issues were and responded to the concerns of their constituents. So we just got 99% more to go. And, nobody ever said the job was going to be easy. But I can see progress. My experience has been regular people, average, everyday Americans and people around the world, when they look at the information, they are absolutely capable of comprehending what is going on here. And, the answer is really very simple. Do you really want one person, Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Director General, Dictator General of the World Health Organization, to be in charge of every aspect of your health? The answer is, very simply no. What did they think they're doing?
No, I know you mentioned about the EU. There was a little bit of a mention by the representative that EU has submitted their documentation also as far as amendment changes are concerned. But we should be worried that anybody's submitting any changes to the specifically to it, because now they've become basically a staffing organization, and some of the governments trying to do the work in order to help the WHO as they think, but really kind of empowering the WHO because of the fact that WHO can turn around and say, you're all part of the staffing process of this. So I don't want to hear it once we hit the deadline next May. I do know that that deadline is closer than most people would like to believe. It is a slow process. And I know you've been instrumental as far as the petitions are concerned. For those who are trying in the various different countries to put pressure on their governments, what is your recommendation as far as the petition process is concerned to try to at least push to get it at least in the debate discussions that should take place? Because even as of today, if people go to the and YouTube, is difficult for our audiences out there for them to know. When I did the 3-year anniversary show on 3 April, where we had published or I had published the article in Japan Forward on the origins of COVID, it was blocked. We were given a strike with the Near East channel, and the two strikes I've ever had has been when I initially interviewed Dr. Zelenko, and I interviewed Ron Rees and Jason Morgan from Japan Forward, and Ron Rees, the intel officer we had that actually was able to link Dr. Barrick and the study that he had done to what Dr. Zelenko was using, but it was never brought out by Fauci or anybody else. Unfortunately, these facts that are out there on paper that has been out there, leaked out, shown, are being banned. So for other audience, I would say just go to our Rumble channel and view the discussion that took place. But what is the process of the petitions, and how can people get active to be able to get those petitions out to get more government leaders speaking about it?
Well, every nation is different, okay? There are people in Canada who have already submitted a petition, and we're going through that process. Same thing in Australia. In the United States, I encourage everybody to go to exitthewho.com. And what we have as a benefit in the United States is Representative Andy Biggs in Arizona has already submitted House Resolution 79, which, if you go to exitthewho.com, it's actually incredibly simple and easy to understand. A lot of times you hear about legislation that's thousands of pages long, and the representatives or senators don't read it. You can literally read this piece of legislation in about 2 minutes, and you'll understand it because it's just simple English. We got into the WHO because of legislation that was passed back in 1948. HR 79 would repeal that legislation. It also says that we're going to stop giving money to the WHO, and we're going to give them a 1-year notice, which is what we agreed to do when we joined back in 1948. This that you're showing right now is the zero draft of what I call the Hookah Plus, because they must be smoking something if they think we're going to agree to this. This is what was published on February 1st. And in their last round of secret meetings, they had a little half-hour meeting on Thursday at the end of their 4-day session. And what they had agreed to do was that between now and April 22nd, all of the nations of the world will have time to still submit proposed language to be added to the zero draft. The zero draft you can think of sort of as an outline. And so the EU, a couple of weeks ago, added another 20 pages to the draft, and all of the nations around the world have been told, please submit additional language by April 22nd, and we probably won't see that. They said that they'll have it ready by May 22nd, which is sort of the first working day of the World Health Assembly, which is where all 194 delegates will meet. The 21st is the first day, but that's usually ceremonial pomp and circumstance. And the first working day is probably the first time we'll get to see what they're calling the Bureau's text. Okay, they were shooting for a first draft, but I don't think they're going to make it. And so what they're going to end up with is a compilation of a bunch of new information. So we're all going to be kind of in for a surprise in May when they get around to revealing the zero draft plus all of the new submissions that they're calling the Bureau's text. And so what also is going on, I know we're going to go back to maybe have another clip from the debate. One of the things that they mentioned in the debate was the fact that the WHO would like to have themselves be set up as the arbiters of all that is true. They want it to be set up where they determine, what the science says. And, it was raised in the debate that, science is ever changing. Anybody who says, you're not allowed to discuss and have differing opinions, that's not science. That's some sort of religious belief or dictatorship, whichever you prefer. And so what is going on with the treaty, okay, is that people have to remember that this is a totally new document. it has a unique set of requirements for it to pass through the World Health Assembly. It requires 2/3 of the members to vote in favor of it. And then each nation would have to then go through their own constitutional process, whether it is through Parliament or the Senate or just a signature by a prime minister or whatever it may be. So the attempts to get the treaty to be adopted have a bit of a more difficult path. Whereas with the amendments, all they have to do is get together and agree to change the amendments with a simple majority. And that's it. It is done.
Yeah.
And so,
No, that's an important part. People have to know, and I've said this, I think, last show we discussed, and I'll say it again. You could have memorandum of understanding, you could have memorandum of agreements, but if anybody violates them, to be honest, there's really not much of a enforcing mechanism behind it. But once we make something a treaty, especially in this country, now it becomes binding. It becomes part of U.S. code, U.S. law. Even the president of the United States or any of the lawmakers can't really buck against it because it becomes a law of the land. So I think that's where the worry is. And frankly, people say that individuals who are against it have called it a pandemic treaty. No, that word has been used by the WHO itself and discussions. You can even go find videos of where they've mentioned it themselves. So if that's what they're calling it, and they understand what, I'm sure they got lawyers who understand what a treaty means rather than an agreement or memorandum of agreement, then, that's what they're pushing for. Where did it originate? Who knows? But we know that the COVID itself was really the reason behind it, what happened to pandemic, to push this idea forward to where we are today. And I have to ask you, I do know that we've had discussions before. My previous show, there was a discussion I had where we were looking at the possibility of what is being projected a possible bird flu pandemic that may hit the global world, the globe, I should say, in 2025 sometime. That's what the projection is. Do you think that there's going to be just too much external pressures with maybe a new pandemic coming down the pike that is going to force these countries to, regardless of what the findings are, to kind of cave into the pressures and adopt these amendments?
well, I'm actually very optimistic that this year it seems like they're very much involved in a soap opera. Many of the nations are arguing, amongst themselves and with each other. The recent meetings with the pandemic treaty and them saying, okay, we're going back to the drawing board. All of the nations can submit additional text by April 22nd, and they're going to have their bureaus text, in the middle of the assembly. I can't for the life of me see how in the world, they're going to even think about adopting the treaty this year. Now, to their credit, they've been saying all along they're shooting for 2024, and I think that's incredibly optimistic. I'm still very concerned about a certain aspect of the amendments where they're looking at instituting a global digital health certificate. And again, the reason I'm concerned about it is it's the one thing that nobody seems to want to talk about. Anybody can find all of that information by going to rejectdigitalenslavement.com. And so there's 307 amendments that are proposed by all of the many nations. They are meeting this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They had a little meeting very, very early this morning for me here in California. And all they had was a half an hour of, nothing. And they're meeting in secret all week about the amendments. And so the story that everybody should be screaming about is, why is all of this happening in secret? What we need is for the transparency and for the public discussion to be had about all of the mistakes that were made over the last 3 years. They're just covering it all up. They're keeping it all quiet. They're doing it all in secret. Kudos to Andrew Bridgen and the folks in the UK who, at the very least, had a public discussion. Yes, it was a tiny, small minority of the people in Parliament, But this is what we, the people, need to do everywhere in the world. Bring this out of the darkness, shine the light on it. It's like any other vermin. When you open the door to a room and there's rats or cockroaches in there, you shine the light on them, they go scurrying all over the place. And if you watch the video, okay, of the discussion in Parliament, at the beginning, there was almost a full house, okay? But by the end of it, everybody had left, okay? They didn't want to be seen in that room, associated with this discussion. They're hiding from the truth. They don't want to talk about, the excess deaths. They don't want to talk about, pick your topic, whatever it might be, the testing, the jabs, the lockdowns, the masks, so forth and so on. They don't want to have an honest scientific discussion of all of the mistakes that they made, because they're culpable for having made horrible decisions, and some would argue criminal decisions. They just want to cover all that over and say, well, the reason is we didn't have enough international cooperation. And there was a very good point made in the debate where it's like, no, that wasn't the reason why we had problems. Actually, we need less of a one size fits all. What if you get the answer wrong? And universally, all around the world, what you decide to do is wrong. What we need is not necessarily competition, but competing ideas about how to best solve any problem. And if one solution seems to be working better, Sweden was mentioned in the debate, that Sweden did a lot of things differently at the beginning. And you look at the African nations and nations all around the world who did things differently and actually did better. You would think that they would want to discuss how they did things so that the results were far better. But what the powers that be are trying to do is consolidate power in the WHO and then funnel all of the money into the pharmaceutical hospital emergency industrial complex. And the people can see the fraud that is built into a system where you have amendments to regulations and you have a proposed treaty, and both of them have a funding mechanism for billions upon billions and billions of dollars. And they're taking money away from fundamental healthcare. And it's another one of the things that was mentioned, that the UK government is shortchanging health in general. And the treaty would command them to spend 5% of all of their health expenditures on pandemic preparedness. How about spending that 5% on people who are ill right now and need health care?
Amazing, absolutely amazing. But I got to tell you, with some of the discussions that took place, I would tell you, I wouldn't mind having those representatives be my representative, because mine doesn't talk about any of this stuff. You were mentioning about learning from others and having competition. For us, the Syrian community, we just celebrated April 1st, 6,773 years of existence. And one thing I knew when I was looking through the historical books and talking to my kids, on the 1st of April, was when the Assyrians went in and had a fight with a major adversary, and they took over that town, or I should say at that time it would be a city. They actually brought the engineers and the military guys that they conquered and said, okay, this is what we did. How did you counter us? And if they saw that the scientists in that city or the opposition did something much better than they were able to do and was much more advanced, they actually adapted it as part of their techniques. They dumped what didn't work. So it's good to have competition because then you could be like the Assyrians were, an empire that who had two climaxes. Even Rome only had one in its history. But with that said, there were a lot of good discussions that took place on the parliamentary floor. I do want to bring up a couple of the key points that were made in the next video we have. I do want to first go to our sponsor real quick, and then from that come in and go right into the video if possible.
We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. The Epoch Times is independent. We're not controlled by any special interest, and we never will be. This is a battle between truth and deceit, a battle between forces that would ensnare this country in ignorance, and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. Subscribe today to our digital edition at theepochtimes.com and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. Read the difference on all your devices. We'd love to have you on board.
That is a huge grab of power, and the two instruments, the pandemic treaty and the amendments to the international health regulations, are progressing in parallel. And for those who, I just really worry whether colleagues in this have actually read the treaty, because clearly, you know, when you take out the words "not binding" as an amendment, it then becomes binding. You know, these are binding treaties. If we do nothing, these treaties are binding. They're legally binding across all the nations. They're bringing in an idea called One Health. So, and this then extends the ability of the Director General of the WHO to call a public health emergency of international concern, which incidentally is abbreviated to FAKE. So, and it says that he can bring it in on the suspicion, the risk of an international incident. It doesn't even have to be about a pathogen that's affecting humans. It can affect animals. He's taking the powers because of the environment, or an increase in the levels of CO2. I suggest that honourable and right honourable members read the treaty. It's a massive extension of powers, and at the drop of a hat, one man, Mr. Tedros, can call for massive powers to the WHO, and not only will he call when he takes the powers, he will decide when the pandemic or the emergency is over, and when he will possibly give us the powers back to this House, where elected representatives are supposed to be representing
the people. You know, there's a reason that we kind of cut it there, because I do want to say representing the people. You know, and obviously, for whatever reason, it boggles my mind why these individuals, representatives who are countering what was being said today on the, in the UK Parliament, are actually, why are they countering it? I mean, if you read the text as you've looked at it and I looked at it now, it's very simple. It's not that difficult to understand. Is it just simple interest?
Well, a lot of the information that is in the treaty did not get discussed, okay? Part of what is in both the treaty and in the amendments is the idea that the WHO should be put in charge of the means of production for pandemic response products. They want to have a logistics network whereby once the Director General declares that there is an emergency, or even just the potential for an emergency, he would be able to tell Nation A that they have to manufacture whatever products he determines are required, as if, you know, he is the most knowledgeable healthcare provider, you know, on the planet, and tell basically more wealthy nations, developed nations, to manufacture the products and give them to developing nations. They want 20% of all of the products made to be run through the WHO so that they can direct traffic and the logistics of who would receive those products, mostly drugs and jabs. They also want to have control over all of the pathogen samples, you know, think the nasal swab tests or any other kind of sample that might be obtained, with everyone's DNA being sent directly to the WHO for them to be the repository of it. They talk about having, making it so that the approval of new medications would happen even faster than it happened over the last 3 years, bypassing all of the safety tests and studies that still to this day have not been done. They talk about making regulatory requirements on laboratories that do gain of function research such that they won't infringe upon that type of research. And so where many people are arguing that that research should not be done at all, right? They're saying they want the regulations to not slow it down. And so the inability of the members of parliament to actually read the documents and comprehend what is actually being considered and to fall back on ad hominem attacks about conspiracy theories and anti-vaxxers. And, they brought up things from the past, whereas, if they had said, oh, in Article 72, or whatever section of the treaty you might want to talk about, I agree with this, or I disagree with that, or I support this for that reason. There were no details brought up by the people who were in support of it. They were just name calling. And I have every confidence in the world that everyday average people can actually read the treaty, they can read the amendments, and when you see these pathetic debates being held where one side is talking about facts and the other is just calling names, the people understand what is going on here. And we've got another year to push back on this, because I do not think that they're going to have any success in getting any of this through in May. I'm very, very confident that we're a year ahead of the game, which does not mean you sit back and relax and take it easy. It means you push harder and nip this in the bud, because they were not expecting for people to be paying attention. That is how they succeed, is people don't pay attention. They get to have all of these secret meetings and come to whatever decisions and conclusions they want, and everybody is left unawares. Well, they know very well that we are watching their every move. As secret as they try to keep it, we will be watching them, and there is no way that they're going to make this happen over the will of the people. We will not allow this to happen. And, kudos to the people in the UK who 11 months ago, it took them literally 11 months after having gotten 100,000 signatures for Parliament to finally, have a public discussion. We need to have that happen in every nation around the world.
Well, I mean, they left Brexit took place because they didn't want to be told what to do and how to do it. And now you have just a regular organization coming on. And, look, people always say, no, these organizations have these individuals with special skills, they spend their life and they're all out there for public good. Organizations are always filled with individuals who have pride, want to hold on to power regardless. I tell people, you can't get somebody, put in charge of a bingo night and then have them step down, a week later because, they want to be the lead. And after they're gone, next thing you know, you walk into association, you see somebody's son or daughter out there running the organizational structure. I mean, to say that this cannot happen to a organization like the WHO, which most people will tell you did a lousy job when it came down to pushing back against China, they're still completely off on their timeline based on what some of the nations have taken steps towards as far as calling a pandemic over. I mean, even the Biden administration is completely discussing different topics than the WHO is today. That is still looking at the possibility of this pandemic still, not being over. So they just to have this organizational structure to be the overall, basically, keeper of the people over the elected representatives. of the individuals in different countries, regardless of how bad my representative might be. And I had not voted for my representative. At least is my representative. It's somebody who, at the end of the day, should care about Americans more than anybody else. And to think that an individual that has no understanding of what the people are dealing with on a daily basis on the ground is going to be running your organizational structure globally just doesn't make sense to me.
Not to jump too far ahead, okay, but looking forward to next year, they're talking about passing both the amendments and the treaty in 2024, and that is going to be right smack in the middle of the heat of the primary season in the United States presidential election. And so it's going to be entertaining to see people who are running for office struggling with the details of the treaty and the amendments. They better start paying attention now, because the people of the United States, for sure, are going to be more well informed than any of the candidates you could possibly imagine. And the candidates are going to be skewered if they're coming down on the wrong side of this discussion. Now, there's many issues that are, important in politics, but this is something that's going to be very, very simple. Are you for giving more power and control to the WHO? Are you for the pandemic treaty? Are you for the amendments to the international health regulations? Or are you in support of exiting the WHO and not giving them any more money and not giving our sovereignty and our dignity and our human rights and our freedoms away to Tedros Ghebreyesus? Do you really want to give up American sovereignty and hand it over to somebody who would be seen as a world health dictator? It's going to be an interesting political season, no doubt about it.
No, it would be, and be interesting what happens after the 2024 election, because if there's a change in government, I don't think that you're going to have too many people supporting the WHO past the November deadline. And then let's see what happens after that. It's unfortunate. It's a lot of the money that the WHO gets comes from private funding. You have nation states that are leads, but then you start looking at the top 5 contributors, and then you're looking at the Gates Foundation as being the third, I believe, main funder for the WHO, and that's a private organization by one individual who has a different vision than most people do as far as what they want to see happen with these particular organizational structures. And then unfortunately, when somebody's paying your bill, just like when you go to work, you do what your boss tells you. In this case, the WHO is not an independent organizational structure. It is funded and ran by individuals who have different visions on things. Maybe they have great ideas, but they have the wrong way of approaching it.
And very clearly, that was raised in the discussions in the UK Parliament. If you add up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Gavi, which is pretty much controlled by Bill and Melinda Gates, they're clearly the number one donor. And he who pays the piper calls the tune. And so You're absolutely right. And the WHO has actually published this on their own website. They recognize publicly that the way they are funded is not a good way to run a health organization, because 80% of the funds that they receive come with strings attached. At some point, you had flashed up the top 10 reasons to leave the WHO, and one of them is very simple. Some of the people in the debate today who were spewing the propaganda and the ad hominem attacks tried to say that it's an organization that is run by the nations that are the members. But what they don't really seem to want to admit is that 80% of the money, is handed over with strings attached to it. They did raise the issue that 60% of the input, meaning the suggestions and the comments and all of that sort of stuff in the run-up to the treaty, came from what they call relevant stakeholders. Now, if you just examine that word, that phrase, a stakeholder is somebody who, that they have a stake in it, that there's an investment that they're expecting to get a return on. And they're looked at as being relevant, which essentially means that you and I are considered to be irrelevant. And you see that very clearly because, there is no people's comment, there is no public comment for the amendments at all. We've had basically any public comments given about the treaty have been completely ignored because nearly 100% of them were, we don't want a treaty, right? We want an analysis of what happened over the last 3 years and a reckoning where, they keep saying no one is safe until everyone is safe. And during these negotiations, they've been saying nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Well, my take on it is no one has been held accountable until everyone has been held accountable for the mistakes that they made, for the bad judgment that they made, for the bad recommendations and decisions they made, and quite frankly, for the crimes that they committed. And so, the people are not unaware of what is going on. And the WHO had better wake up and realize that we see what they are trying to do, and they are not going to get away with it.
Well, we're not going to let them try to get away with it, But look, at the heart of it, these are bureaucracies. Bureaucracies are self-licking ice creams. A friend of mine asked me, he goes, "Do you think the Central Intelligence Agency has information on everything that has happened till now when it came to the pandemic and COVID?" I said, "Yeah, they do. They probably briefed it." He goes, "How come they're not sharing it?" I said, "Because the second they do, people are going to say, well, if you knew it, why didn't you tell us?" And now they're going to be under the crosshair. So organizations don't like to blame themselves for their own stupidity. They always try to, kind of say that we're made of Teflon, that will handle the issues internally. But you cannot operate people's health in the hands of individuals who have proven time and time again that they've done probably the worst possible thing. I mean, when you look at the Zelenko protocol, you talk about taking zinc, quercetin, and simple minerals out there that are going to help you in the first 5 days to 6 days of stopping the replication of a virus. But when you get a pharmaceutical saying, well, we're going to wait until you're in the hospital when it's too late anyway and give you a pill that costs $6,000 and it can only be given through, if not a pill form now, in the past it was an IV form, then it's too late. But, they're making money off of it. Who's going to throw away their dollars in order to be able to, in the trillions, just to be able to say, what was out there holistically was going to work to stop the replication of a virus that probably could have been killed without all the lockdowns we did to the people.
Well,
Go ahead, James.
one of the amendments would change Article 3 of the International Health Regulations. And we talked about this before, but it bears mentioning again. They would cross out respect for dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms of people and replace it with equity. And, equity people have the illusion that it means equality. But if you look in the financial markets, equity is money. And so really what they are saying is that rather than, your dignity, your human rights, and your fundamental freedoms, we're going to redistribute a little bit of wealth here and make it more financially equitable. But if you really understand how it all works, it all goes back to the players who have a seat at the table. If you think that the people who are there as relevant stakeholders who have large foundations with billions of dollars that they're donating and are invested in the companies that make the pandemic response products, if you think they're in it for your health, you've got another guest coming. It's just not the case.
Well said. I got to tell you, James, you always break it down well, and it's funny. Yesterday, my friend celebrated on the Eastern calendar, the Easter weekend, of course. And Jesus Christ was, by most Christians' beliefs, was the Son of God, and depending on your denomination. And it took him really 30 years to finally say, okay, I'm ready to get something done. And in 3 years, he got his mission done. You're going to have an individual who's in charge of the WHO who doesn't have any of the significant powers or sway, but we're going to give him all the authorities to be able to figure out how the heck to get the entire world community to work together. One man who suffered on the cross couldn't get us to get our head out of our full point of contact. But we're going to have this elected, not elected, I mean, appointed bureaucrat going to figure out how the heck to get everybody on the planet to work together. Humanity, as always, pride is a hell of a thing. And they all think that they could, in their lifetime, do whatever they can. As I always tell people, everybody who's ever planned for the future never made it to that day. Would it be, a 13-year-old kid or an 80-year-old man, planning for what he's going to do over the next couple of days, even. If people want to follow you, James, where can they go, and what is the next thing on the agenda on the calendar for the WHO?
Well, the WHO this week is meeting in secret again. They're still talking about the international health regulations. And then on May 21st to the 30th, the World Health Assembly will be occurring. I encourage everybody in the United States to go to exitthewho.com and reach out to the Congress people who are listed there in support of H.R. 79, which is the Withdraw from the WHO Act. And if you're anywhere else in the world, or if you are from the United States, go to exitthewho.org. And what I encourage people to do is read the documents. You can get all of that information on stopthewho.com. Read up on the information, learn what's going on, and go to exitthewho.org and record your own video and say whatever it is you want to say. And then take the link to that video and send it to your congressperson, send it to your senator, send it to your member of parliament. You have the ability in your pocket or your purse, most likely everybody has a cell phone that can record them, or you can do it on a laptop like I'm doing right here. Record a short video of whatever it is you want to say. Put it up on Rumble or BitChute or Odyssey or Brighteon or any of the other platforms. Put it on YouTube if you want. For the most part, I don't think YouTube is paying attention to this issue. And send it to your congressperson, your senator, everyone else that you could possibly imagine, because they consider your silence to be consent. And unless we, the people, say very clearly that we don't want them to do what they're doing, and we let it be known very clearly that we want the sovereign control over our own lives and our own health, if we don't speak, they assume that they have the right to do whatever it is they want. And so I want to hear everybody in the world putting out their videos. I want to hear what you have to say about what the WHO thinks they're going to be doing in the future. I suspect most of your viewers have a slightly different opinion about what they would like to have happen.
No, and look, we want to hear from everybody, right? Because not one person has all the ideas in the world. I was, and I encourage our audiences out there, please participate. It's very important. I was an election judge on April 4th in the local elections, and we shared a parking lot with a food bank that was distributing food to people who are needy. And this is a good, some people would say middle of the class to even wealthy suburbs around it. And unfortunately, I was standing there looking at the window, and I counted more people going into the food bank than they came in to vote. Now, maybe those individuals had voted before, but you need to vote to make sure that you don't have to go to the food bank. But a lot of time people have just turned off and believe that representatives don't listen to you. It doesn't matter. You do what you have to do your job, and put pressure on the system in order for the system to start listening. And if it doesn't, eventually every representative has left office, whether by choice or not. And if they had an opportunity, most of them will die in office and pass on the legacy to their loved ones to make generational wealth. But you have to put pressure on the system, at least for the next generation.
And one of the things that I heard in the debate today was the members of parliament who were there speaking up. They let it be known very clearly that their constituents had let them know that they wanted them to speak on their behalf. And, 1% of the members of parliament did. And kudos to them for doing that. But more importantly, kudos to the people who let their members of parliament know who they work for. And that's what we all have to do.
No, definitely do your job. That's it. Do your job, and every little step helps. With that said, James, it's wonderful to have you here. We'll have you back again. We'll continue this until we figure out what happens in 2024. I do want to let our audiences know that again, if you like our podcast here, please do us a favor and help us. Go to the Exit the Hoop, take a picture of the QR code, and then also at the same time, go to United Assyrian Appeal and help donate. We've been trying to help the Christian Assyrians of Northern Iraq who desperately need some support, especially after this Easter weekend. And also much appreciated for Certain Productions and Fred to have given us the opportunity to produce quality shows every week, to have guests like you over. And I will tell you, watching that UK discussion, I really encourage our audiences, please go and listen to it. It's okay, go listen to it. If you're going to sit through an hour of baseball, like I love baseball, I'll watch every game anytime. Watch that debate. You'll learn a lot from it. It was wonderfully done. I think it was a great discussion that took place. With that said, we're going to exit with a final video of the discussions that took place at the UK Parliament. And I will see you back here again, James. And this is New Paradigms. God bless.
Our regulators in the UK, the MHRA, 86% funded by industry sources. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, in their personal declarations, they declared over £1 billion of interests in Big Pharma, the thing they were set out to regulate. This undermines public confidence. Well, the WHO now is no longer anything like majority funded by its member states, the people who it is seeking to control. It's 86% funded by external sources. I'm not sure that my honourable friend for Winchester is correct. The UK is not the third largest donor. The second largest donor, it's the third largest donor. The second largest donor after Germany is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I think Gavi is the fifth. So you add those together, they are the biggest donors to the WHO. And you have to think, why are they doing this? They're also the biggest donors or biggest investors in pharmaceuticals and the experimental mRNA technology, which proved so profitable for those who proposed it and produced it during the last pandemic. Indeed, the WHO, it says the member states' contributions to WHO funds have been capped and today account for only 16% of WHO's total budget, with an increasing share of funding to WHO coming from voluntary contributions, where donors direct funding according to their priorities. Well, their priorities might not well be the priorities of my constituents in North West Leicestershire or the electorate in the UK, but he who pays the piper calls the tune.
We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. The Epoch Times is independent. We're not controlled by any special interest, and we never will be. This is a battle between truth and deceit, a battle between forces that would ensnare this country in ignorance, and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. Subscribe today to our digital edition at theepochtimes.com and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. Read the difference on all your devices. We'd love to have you on board.